Warning. This episode contains adult language and adult humor.
Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults?
If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Keith Fiala. Keith is a talented trumpet player who is not afraid of change. From honing his chops on the Austin music scene to touring with the legendary Maynard Ferguson, Keith's career was already a success. But thanks to his mentor, boss, and practice partner Arturo Sandoval, Keith is on the path to a fresh approach to the trumpet and to life. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. Welcome to this week's episode of the Trumpet Gurus Hang. I am your host, Jose Johnson. I am joined by Mr. Keith Fiala. Mr. Keith, what's happening, bro?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Oh, man, I am just living the dream out here in wonderful central Pennsylvania, and you are out in sunny, smoky California right now. So how is it out there, man? What's going on?
You know, it depends on the day. It depends on the wind. Sometimes you have smokier days than others. Like right now, today, it's very clear. It's very beautiful. So, you know, no complaints. I mean, this is to me, heavenly weather all year round.
Oh, so, yeah. Yeah, you're originally from Austin. Oh, no, you were originally from Des Moines, right?
Right, Iowa. Moved down to Austin in '88 to study at UT. Stayed there for a long time, and then got the opportunity to work with Arturo in 2017.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that here in a bit, but yeah, just kind of set the stage for folks who may not know much about you. So Iowa boy, corn-fed boy.
100%.
100%. Yeah. And so Austin, that is, Austin has certainly over the past few decades developed the reputation of being a very cool place for artists. So what was the music scene like while you're there?
Well, I got to be honest, when I first moved there, it was more hip than what it is now. Yeah, it was kind of a hidden gem. It was one of those places that you could go to, and on a Tuesday night you could walk down the street and any number of guys would be playing. Like Kirk Whalen would be playing at a place called Baxter's. Baxter's disappeared. A bunch of the very, very, really hippie, cool places like there was a place on 2nd Street that's now gone that, they bring in world artists. So Johnny Clegg and the Sabuka, I saw them. It was very cool. And then they started doing what was initially, what's the word for it? Oh my God, it happens in the spring. I haven't had enough coffee.
Southwest.
Thank you. South by Southwest. Yeah. It was very cool. It was supposed to draw in people to hear local bands and, regional musicians that would drive in and perform and kind of give you an idea of, hey, these guys are out here. They're having a hard time being noticed. And then it turned into this corporate thing. And so it started becoming known as the locals say, South by So What. Yeah. So it's like, now you have to have a badge. You got to have thousands of dollars. And so the city started really capitalizing on that. Through the decades, I was out on tour with Maynard Ferguson in 2004, and largely for the period of the year. And so when I came back to Austin and started kind of integrating and working in Austin again, I was looking around going, man, this place has really changed, and not for the good. It became very, very corporate. A lot of people have moved in. So some of the places, the venues that I was playing in cover bands out by the lake were either shutting down or no longer doing live music because the people that were moving out there were like, we don't like the music. So it's like, well, you're moving to the live music capital of the world, or so it's coined.
Right.
So by the time I got out of there, I was happy to leave. Like I said, the taxes had gotten expensive. It got more corporate. I was kind of done with the Texas heat. I guess as I got older, I got more intolerant of it. And I didn't want to wake up at 70 and playing someone's wedding.
Yeah.
70 years old. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's interesting to hear that coming from you because, being out here in the East Coast ish, whatever you want to call it, the reputation that South by Southwest has, or at least in the past, since I've been aware of it, was, oh man, this is this really cool, very hip kind of thing. But, I guess, for someone who has kind of been in the middle of it and seen, where it started and what it turned into, that it may not be exactly what it has been presented to be to a lot of artists. So
sadly, it's not. I mean, if you have a big name and you're trying to get your name bigger and you have sponsorships, then I'm hearing that South by Southwest is a good thing for you. But if you're an independent artist and you're really trying to get, your legs under you, the opportunities, they're going to put you at a spot at 2:00 in the morning on a Thursday night where you're going to have 4 people that can't see straight anymore,
right,
listening to you. So
yeah,
it's one of those corporate things.
Yeah, it's funny because I have a few friends. Actually, one who was going to South by Southwest for a bit. They're local or regional music producers, or they put on shows and things like that, and they've tried to launch music festivals in our area. And even that sometimes, I mean, I just really I have a kind of a sour taste in my mouth with music festivals because they're really not that much about the music.
They're not. I understand survival of the fittest. I understand, and the festival has to make money. They have employees to pay. They have bands to pay.
Right.
And you don't want to come out of it, in the negative.
Exactly.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, if you're going to call it, if you're going to paint it as your opportunity, or say said person's opportunity to be discovered, then try to keep it that way.
Yeah, and it was a lot of the, hey, if you already have a following, we're going to put you on the main stage, and if you're trying to get a following, we're going to stick you on those Tuesday night at 2:00 in the morning, and
exactly.
Yeah, so which actually should be the other way around. You would think, it's like the people that need to get the most exposure are the people that should be, captive, on that main stage, because you want to give them a shot. So let's kind of launch from there. You went on the road with Maynard. That section, let's see, that was Carl in the band at that time?
It was. My first run was Carl Fisher, Patrick Hessian, myself.
Mm-hmm.
When we broke over the summer, Carl had already picked up the Billy Joel thing and was starting to work with Billy. So it was, I haven't seen the guy in forever. I'll think of it. Kenny. Yeah. Not Kenny Robinson. Yeah.
That guy, that Kenny.
Oh my God, he's gonna watch his podcast and go, "Really, dude? You forgot my name." Great guy, great player, and Patrick's still on lead. Patrick was, through the entire tenure.
Yeah.
And then I left in November of 2004.
Okay, and let's see. That I'm trying to think. That was man. Now I'm drawing a blank. Reggie was the musical director at that point.
He was the MD, at that point.
Yeah. That was a kicking band, man.
It was.
Yeah. So, what was your connection to get into the band? I mean, how did that all come about?
I had a local friend that introduced me in the way you could be introduced in 2002, 2003. To Reggie, and he said, "Hey man, I understand you want on the band. Send me an audition tape and we'll see if we can stick you in line." And so at that time, I got a call early 2004, and Reggie said, "We've heard your tape. Maynard likes what you do. Do you want the gig?" And I jumped at it, not having any intentions of making money. You don't go out with Maynard to make money,
right?
You go out for the experiences, and I'm glad I did. I learned a ton. Got my tail tucked between my legs a few times, which I really needed. And it was a great experience.
Yeah. That band, I keep threatening to do an episode of MF alumni and get the guys together, because there were certainly many stories about people like Buddy Rich that were not necessarily that great.
Not favorable.
But everybody that I've talked to, and everybody I know that played on Maynard's band, they've always come away saying, wow, that was like really kind of a transformational period for me, and I learned so much from him and his attitude and things like that. So.
Oh, he was one of the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life. Very jovial, very kind. Yeah, I mean, never heard a cross word from him. He was just a beautiful guy.
Yeah, but still, I know being a trumpet player in that band had to be tough because you've got one of the all-time greats standing in front of you, and he hears everything. So,
oh yeah, he knew everything.
Yeah, that's interesting when you say like kind of the personality. Obviously you have the stage personality, and then you have the off-stage personality, and it's always great when you find people who what you see on stage is basically the same person, maybe just a little bit bigger because of having to project your personality. But in terms of like the management style, was he just when you did not live up to your expectations, I mean, was he more of the hey, let's get it the next time kind of guy, or the pick up a shoe and throw it at you kind of guy?
No, not at all. He was very kind. There were a few times I started running into problems because I was trying to switch gear on the band, which is a huge mistake. I should have listened to Carl Fisher. So Carl, if you're listening, thank you for the advice. I'm sorry I didn't heed it. And so, in talking with Maynard, he really offered guidance, and he really offered me just the shoulder that I needed, because I had okay teachers as a kid. I think I had more hunger than anything. Had I had better guidance, I think I would have gotten a little, in a different place. So it's taken me a lot of years to make things up. But Maynard was very forthcoming with anything he thought that might help. Never once did he go, "Hey man, you suck tonight." It was never like that. So yeah, he was a really inspirational, beautiful guy.
Yeah. Cool. So, now we transition, you've played with, definitely one of the Mount Rushmore of trumpet, right there with Maynard, and, you come back to Austin, and then how do you find yourself working with a person who's, arguably, if not the greatest, one of the greatest trumpet players alive today? I feel like, in terms of being an all-around musician, I think there are very few people that can hold a candle to what Arturo has been able to do and accomplish in his career, and is still doing. So how do you end up being with Arturo?
I briefly met him while touring with Maynard, so I was very fortunate to get to meet him. And to be honest, I mean, I humbly asked, I should say I worked up the courage to humbly ask if I could possibly maybe take a lesson from him. And instantly, just a really, really nice guy. I hear a lot of people say different things about him, even before I'd met him. And so I try not to take away from other people's experiences, try to have my own.
Right.
And I found him instantly just a warm guy, kind of guarded, like he should be, because he's way up there. And most people are clamoring to try to get to him to see what they can get from him.
Right.
And so he gave me his information, and I started studying with him. Because I lived in Texas, I was having to go out only once a year, once every other year, whatever I could afford to do. And then as time got going, like around 2011, 2012, I started going out once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year, spending more time with him. Mm-hmm. And we really developed a nice friendship, a nice symbiotic friendship. And in 2017, he was down at TMEA, which is Texas Music Educators Association, it's the conference. He was invited to play with a high school band. And so I drove down to San Antonio and spent the afternoon with him, spent the morning with him, went and had lunch. And I had already been thinking about, God, can I even begin to try to make it in Los Angeles? Mm-hmm. We had that conversation a couple years before. And we're eating lunch, and he's looking at me and he goes, "When are you moving to Los Angeles?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm working on it." And he says, "Okay, you're going to come work for me." And I really thought he was joking.
Right.
I didn't take him serious. I went, "Oh yeah, okay, sure." And so we finish lunch. He doesn't say anything else. He says, "Okay, come back to my hotel. I got to pack. I've got to go." And so I did. So we get in the room. He says, "Sit down." So I sit down on the couch, and he looks at me and goes, "I'm serious. I want you to join my band." He said, "This is what I need." And I was like, well, how can I say no?
Right.
So halfway between in tears and excitement and mind blown, he tells me he needs someone that can help him on the road, a road manager basically that can take care of any issues that come up, set him up, sound check for him so he's not having to deal with that stuff. And then he can just basically kick back and enjoy the gig like it's supposed to be. And that's been my gig with him. As you know, once I moved out, he called me up one day and he goes, "Hey man, I need a practice partner." And I said, "You do?" And so it turned into where I was basically hanging with him. If we were on the road, I was there 2, 3, 4 times a week, and we were practicing together. And of course, what am I going to say? No.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, now it's spiraled into where he's really been a complete and total inspiration to try to get my own thing going.
Mm-hmm.
He's very supportive of that. But at the same time, I don't want to leave his side. So as he does his thing, I'll be there for him as support. Mm-hmm. And he's supportive of what I want to do on my end. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's awesome, man, because, mentoring is, it's become kind of a lost art.
It really has.
Find people that are willing to take you under their wing and share their experiences and stuff like that. And to be able to spend time with him in so many different, areas, the arena of the performance, the arena of, just the road gigs, and then the business side of things. Man, those are invaluable lessons.
Yeah, I think, honestly, the biggest thing that I could spend the rest of my days trying to repay and could never repay, he made it safe to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And I never had that in my past. It was either you were good or you weren't, and there was no in between. Right. So it's almost like saying you have talent, you have no talent. And so when it was one of the first few practice sessions that we were working together, and he could tell I was visibly uptight. And he looks at me and goes, "What's wrong? What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Man, I don't want to sound bad in front of you." He goes, "Why?" And so we had that discussion, and he really, like I said, the best way to say it is he made it safe for me to sound bad, to be able to grow and go, "Oh, that's why I'm sounding bad. This is how I'm going to fix it."
Right. And, actually that was one of the points that, I wanted to discuss with you. We were talking pre-interview about the person who was responsible for hooking us up, which was Mike Del Quadro. Those of you who don't know Mike, I did an interview with him several episodes ago, so check it out. But Mike was saying to me, he's like, Keith, he said, every time I hear him, he's getting better, but, he's just on the grind. I mean, he is just practicing like crazy, and he's, posting all this stuff, and you got to check it out. And listening to us, it really inspired me because, it's very easy once you establish yourself as a professional to play it safe and to not do things to push yourself, and especially not to push yourself in public, in front of the public eye, and but that's the only way you're going to get better. You've got to be willing to do the things that you can't do, and the first time you try it, you're going to sound like ass. There's just no two ways about it. So I was checking out your video of you playing Cherokee, and you're kind of just being honest about, like, hey, this tune always scared me, and now it doesn't. So, right. That, I think if anything else, I mean, that's just a huge contribution that you've made to anyone who's going to see or hear that, of saying, yeah, it's okay to admit that I've got this deficiency, but I worked on it. That's amazing.
Yeah. No, and that's the biggest thing. Like I said, and without Arturo's guidance, the old me, say 4 years ago, there's no way in God's green earth I would have even touched that tune, because it intimidated me, and especially at those ridiculous tempos.
Oh.
So it's one of those things I've worked on and worked on and worked on, and I actually, before I posted it, I called Arturo and I said, will you listen to this and see what you think? And he gave me the truth. I mean, and that's what I can always expect from him. It's never that he's trying to blow sunshine up my skirt. It's always him being honest. Yes, it sounds great, post it. No, I'd go back and I'd work on this, because there's been a lot of videos that I've sent him, or songs that I've sent him, and he's like, man, you need to go back and check that chord, because you're playing an E and it should be an E flat. And he hears that stuff, and it's amazing how quickly he can grab that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very kind, and I really appreciate Mike saying that, and I appreciate you saying that, because it really should be about growth, man. It's not about who's better, who can play higher. It has nothing to do with that. Music is a language. Yeah. Bottom line.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's very easy to lose sight of why we do this.
Right.
Nobody picked up the trumpet saying, well, no one I know picked up the trumpet saying, I'm going to cut this guy. I'm going to stomp this guy. The reason we picked it up, and stuck with it, was because we loved it. We loved the sound. We loved the feel of the horn. We loved we loved the creativeness of the instrument. And somewhere along the line, we lost sight of the beauty that can come out of that instrument, and especially when we start getting paid for it. I think sometimes that's the kiss of death right there, because you become so afraid of making a mistake and not getting called back for a gig, so I think that embracing the joy, and the joy has a lot. So I'll just tell the story quickly. So bear with me, audience. I've been playing trumpet for most of my life. Most guys, started about 5th, 6th grade, something like that. But what I have done for the past 30 years more than anything else is I've been a martial arts instructor, professional martial artist.
Beautiful.
And, one of my teachers, a very famous teacher from China, had this quote, and it made perfect sense then, and it makes even more sense now. He said, when you do something, you need to do it with feeling, not just try to do things technically correct. There needs to be some feeling to what you're doing. He says that, it's like when you try to kiss someone. He says, if you try to make sure you have the proper moisture on your lips and the right placement and the pressure is correct, that's not a kiss. A kiss, if it's sloppy and you get half of the face, and but it has passion, then you communicate through that. And I think with trumpet, it's the same thing. We worry so much about being, what's the right embouchure, what's the right equipment, what's this, what's that, instead of what's the feeling. And if you're a little sloppy but you got great feeling, and you're connecting with people, I think that's more important than anything else.
Right. I agree with you 100%. Arturo has a great way of saying things. Very, very, very few trumpet players are true artists. True artists are basically inside the music, and they're not worried about the high notes. They're not worried about how loud they're playing or how perfect they're playing. They're worried about the music and the message that they're conveying. If you go down from that, you have the trumpet players, and those are the guys that are technically proficient, but they lack a little soul.
Yeah.
And then you have the bottom rung, which is where I was for a very, very long time, and I'm trying to climb my way up. You have the blowers. You have the guys that are basically just the linebackers of the band. They're playing loud. They're playing high. They're worried about, like what you said, the gear, the embouchure, all the stuff, all the physicality of it, and the music is the last thing they're thinking about. And that's when I finally woke up to that fact. It was like, oh my God, have I been missing that all of these decades? Because really, ultimately, you're right. It's about the music. It's about the kiss, not about, anything else.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's still a rung below that, and that's where I am. I'm the suckers. So, I can't even blow, and I just basically suck. So, no, I'm just kidding. Although some of my bandmates will probably agree with that. Anyway, when we think about, like, for yourself, you're talking about, you were in Austin, you're with Maynard, you're with Arturo, you've had all these different things going on. So it seems like you've made a few fairly major changes in your life. You've had some milestones and some metamorphosis going on, and now you're working on basically, I guess, kind of a new approach to music and trumpet and what it means to you. So what's gone through your mind as you've been approaching these kind of pivotal moments in your life? I mean, what are the thought processes that you have, and what are kind of some of the big lessons that you've gotten out of these so far?
Well, okay. So the best way to say it is I had to learn to get out of my own way, because I think what happens is we hit a certain point and we become defensive and almost like protective of what we've accomplished or what we're trying to accomplish. And so we set up these barriers. And so when you go to someone like Arturo, or you go to someone who you admire, Wynton Marsalis, you really, much like martial arts, they start you off with a white belt because they feel like that's your mind is empty and you're an open book to be able to receive the knowledge.
Right.
That's really what you need to be a student of music, not just trumpet, but of music. And I've met a lot of guys. I've sat in some of the lessons that Arturo's taught. I've had guys ask me questions. Hey, what does Arturo tell you to do about this? And then instantly when you start to tell them, they're like, oh yeah, no, I knew all that. I knew all that. It's like, bro, if you know that, it's not showing. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's the first and foremost thing I had to do, is I had to get out of my own way and go, okay, I don't know anything. And everything I knew up to this point is irrelevant. So that's been the biggest thought process. And every time I run into a stumbling block, I have Arturo to fall back on, because I can call him up and go, boss, if you ever run into this, oh, of course, so you're not the only one out there that has had to practice 15 million hours a day just to try to be able to play at 150 or 200 or at 60 with feeling. It's what it takes. So yeah, that's been the biggest thing, is getting out of my own way.
Yeah. Well, that's really powerful, because I often would tell my students back in the day that if I try to give a correction and they go, oh yeah, I know that, like, no, look, if you say you know it and you can't do it, that means either A, you really don't know it, or B, you're intentionally not doing it. Right? So you're either lacking knowledge or you're lacking motivation. So which one is it? And
exactly.
So it's being able to be humble. And I always look at art as a refining process. It's not about gaining more skills,
Right.
particularly. Once you get a level of general mastery, once you can play the trumpet, if you can play your scales and just basically, have modicum of ability on the horn, it's about stripping away stuff. It's about getting rid of the bad habits. It's about getting rid of the mental garbage that we all tend to have. And I think especially trumpet players, we are the most mental people in the world sometimes.
And we're the hardest people on not only ourselves, but our fellow trumpet players.
Mm-hmm.
It can be brutal. You're exactly right. And I think, the three most dangerous words anyone can say is, I know that.
I know that.
Yeah, exactly. If you can keep your mind open, and I see it a lot on social media, where people are so closed and they have blinders on and they refuse to see any other way. And that can be any topic. And it's really sad, because it's like, wow, you're really limiting yourself to growth, because ultimately I had a mentor years ago tell me, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah. So
continue to grow, because look at a tree. A tree doesn't ever stop growing until it's done.
Right.
So that's the lesson I've learned, not only from Arturo, but also from Maynard. Keep going. you're not at the end. It's not a destination. It's a continual journey.
Yeah. Well, this is actually the first time that you and I have had a conversation. I have been familiar with your work before. I mean, obviously from Maynard's band, but also, I remember seeing some clips of you with Pops.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that you were working on with him. And that and as I thought about things, today as I was preparing to talk with you, it's like, that's kind of Keith. Keith seems to be willing to put himself out there and to look at ways to improve his playing, and not just say, well, this is the way I was taught and this is the way I'm always going to do it. You seem to have that attitude of how can I make things a little bit better. So, in terms of like, your concepts of playing, I know that you had I don't know if you still you sell the book. You had a method of about face.
Uh-huh.
So what's that all about, and what are the concepts you use with your teaching methods?
I got to be honest. I haven't actually really taught a lesson in a long time since I moved out to Arturo. But that book was written because I had gone through an issue where I had some personal issues, was working out, and I lost weight. And when you lose weight, you don't lose it just in your midsection,
right.
You lose it everywhere. And so I started going through bad chop problems again. And so one of the first calls I made was to Wayne Bergeron, because I understood he went through the same thing, but in a different way for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And he turned me on to saying I needed to call Chad Shootman because Chad Shootman had gone through the same issue. And I was fortunate enough that Arturo agreed to do an interview with me as well. And that's really what the basis of the book was about, was that, you have to do the right things in the right way. It's not about the gear. I do believe not all mouthpieces fit and work for everybody. So not everybody can be on a 7C or a 3C or a 5C. And that's a little limiting from a lot of the band directors in Texas that I used to work with.
Mm-hmm.
So the book kind of addresses that. But the books, there was one previous to that too, The Secrets of Efficiency, or whatever I called it back then, back in 2009. It was more of like, should we say, a milestone of where I was on my journey in the growth. There's a lot of things I would write differently now from what I wrote 11 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's also part of the beautiful journey too,
Yeah. I had a student once who got so frustrated with me and was talking to one of his classmates and saying, I can't believe Jose. I mean, it's like all the stuff that I learned from him 10 years ago, he does it now, and it's totally different. And she looked at him and goes, yeah, he's getting better and learning more. So yeah, it should change. And I think so many of us look at that as a negative. If your concepts are, if they have to evolve. If you're evolving as a person, if you're changing as a person, then your approach has to change. And sometimes it's not even evolution. Sometimes it's the decline, because as in the case of losing weight, as you get older, any kind of physiological change and even psychological changes are going to manifest themselves in a change in the way you have to approach things. And so, if you can't do those kind of internal compensations, then, that's when you have to rely on some kind of external crutch or aid in order to do that. So, sometimes it's an equipment change, sometimes it's an approach change, sometimes it's, play a different instrument. I don't know. But, but yeah, that's kind of cool that you were able to work through that. And yeah, the weight loss thing. Yeah, I know a lot of guys who've gone through that.
It can really mess you up. It's one of those situations, like I said, where you have a certain placement and you have a certain feel that you're used to, and when that feel disappears over time, very slowly, because it's almost one of those things where you just don't even realize it. I used to beat my face senseless, and I would do that for days days, weeks on end, and I come back the next day and it's like, why is nothing working? Well, you don't have receptors up here to say, hey, I'm tired. Like if you go and work out at the gym really hard, you're going to wake up the next day going, oh man, I'm not doing that again. Your face doesn't give you the same indicator.
Yeah.
So that makes it frustrating because we don't know why things are working. We just know they're not working.
Yeah.
And so hence the mouthpiece game, oh, I don't like this horn anymore. It's not giving me what I wanted. The sound's different. No, man, you've got to find a balance with everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of times that people tend to, it's like if things aren't working, then you go into panic mode and it's like, let's change everything, exactly. New mouthpiece, new horn, whatever. It's like, let's just change everything instead of, trying to identify one variable and adjust that one variable, tweak that variable. And if that works, then great, then, but it's almost like a scientific approach to playing. And of course we know from our current environment, science means nothing. So, but that's really cool that you've, it's one of those things where you hate that you had to go through it, but once you've gone through it and you've developed a level of understanding and being a compassionate and empathetic person, then you're wanting to make sure that you can prevent someone else from having to make go through the same level of distress that you went through.
Exactly. And like I said, I mean, the biggest thing was getting out of my own way because I was very defensive. There were a lot of instances where I just didn't want to hear it. I wouldn't listen. Someone would be like, hey man, yeah, you sound good, but you really should be working on this. And I'm like, nope, don't want to hear it, inside my mind while I'm smiling at them.
Right.
And it turns out looking back, it's like, wow, they were right. I should have been doing that stuff. I should have been doing this systematically every single day to promote growth. And I'm grateful that I woke up.
Well, eventually you will grow up. So it's
exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So right now, what would you classify your approach to music as being? I mean, like if you think about, okay, what's the biggest difference between Keith from 10 years ago to Keith from today in terms of your approach to trumpet and music?
Easy. I don't think about high notes. I don't care about high notes. If they're there, great. If they're not, I don't care. I don't see how high I can play every day. Unless I'm doing something that's like an expanding scale or, I'm more focused on trying to warm up everything. First and foremost, get my mind on the game. Secondly, make sure that I'm doing proper things that are going to warm up the face and the breathing. What was it? God, there was a great guy who passed away several years ago that had a great saying, and it was basically engage brain before inserting mouthpiece in gear. And it was exactly right. And you have to be in the right mental frame before you can start doing anything physical. And it's the same for an athlete or anybody else. Yeah. And so I go through a process every single day. It's the same routine. And it's something that Arturo and I have worked on that I've found that basically gets me prepared. And it also starts to put me in the frame of mind of, okay, let's push the envelope a little bit faster today. Let's see if my tongue will work faster today or better. Will it be more in alignment? I'm hyper focused on sound where I wasn't before. Mm-hmm. I'm doing what Arturo calls cleaning the sound. So taking a G and trying to make that G at any given volume as clean as you can with beautiful sound and resonant sound, not loud, because learning from him, people go, man, he plays loud. No, he plays full. Mm-hmm. It's not loud, it's full. There's a difference. Loud has characteristics of like you can hear it to start sparkling and it just doesn't sound centered and focused anymore. So that's been a big thing. Taking a lot of his guidance, actually saying it correctly, taking all of his guidance and trying to instill it every single day. Mm-hmm. I spend a large amount of time in the Clark book. I spend a bit of time in the Arbans every single day. And then Timofey Dakshizar wrote a book, great classical guy from Moscow, Russia. He was principal for the Moscow Symphony for 30, 35 years. Amazing book, extremely frustrating. So I spend a fair amount of time in it every day as well. And just trying to play as clean and as pretty as I can, no matter what. So it's funny because I used to have the same mentality, and I heard somebody come into a lesson with Arturo, and he opens up the Arbin book at the very front of the book, and it's quarter notes, half notes, and the person who shall remain sexless and nameless and just a vivid of your imagination said, I really want to work on improvisation, and I'm here to learn how to do that and play with better range. And so that he's like, okay, but let's do this. And he said, okay, but when do we get to the music? And Arturo stopped, and he put his horn down, and he said, what do you think this is? And that's another huge aha moment, because that was fairly early into my tenure with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped and thought, oh my God. And then he said to me multiple times, if you can't play that musically, we got nothing else to talk about. So whether you're playing 30 million second notes, 30-second notes, or you're playing half notes, whole notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, it has to be musical and it has to be beautiful. That wasn't my mentality before. I didn't care what the rhythm was. I'm going to hit the high G,
Yeah.
And that was it. So long story short, but that's the answer to the question.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, that's really cool. And yeah, I have talked to a lot of people about that recently, that, the musicality, especially in terms of technical studies. I've was fortunate enough to be able to interview my friend Scott Belk, who wrote his lip slur books are they're great. I mean, first of all, they're just funny as hell.
They're brutal.
They're brutal. I mean, they are absolutely brutal. But it's the idea of, hey, you need to do this kind of work, but it doesn't have to be as tedious as we tend to make it. So if you can start to learn how to approach everything, your long tones, your flexibility work, your technical studies, if you can't play those musically, then you can't do anything. But the problem is because we, from the educational standpoint, those were segmented. It's like, okay, this is technical studies, and then this is, now you're playing music. It's like, no, as soon as you get your horn out, you're making music.
Exactly. So, it's a musical instrument. It's funny, Maynard told me when I first joined the band, he said that his favorite people to listen to, favorite musicians, were opera singers. And so his approach to music from when he was a child was to be as operatic as he possibly could. So if you listen to the recording of Pagliacci, or Scheherazade,
mm-hmm.
or Maria, oh my God, it's so flowing and musical. And trumpet players fall extremely short because they hear the high notes. Well, an opera singer is going to hear not only the high notes, but the lyricism and the musicality. And so they're going to have a different mental approach to it. And when I finally woke up to that fact, and this is long after I left Maynard's band, I was like, oh my God, that's what he was telling me. So there's so many things that we hear that basically falls on deaf ears because it can't get past, our blockages.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're exactly right. The Scott Belk book, some of the other books that have been written based off the Clark or based off the Arbins,
mm-hmm.
that are meant to twist things. Michael Sachs is another one. Michael Sachs is an amazing trumpet player that has written some really great books that Arturo and I have worked out of. And, it's funny because Arturo said this to me. He said, if you look at this, it looks very simple, but it's not. Because it has to be played with musicality and it has to be played with emotion and feeling. And he said, if you can make somebody cry off the first few pages of Arbin, now you've got it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that ability to just speak through the horn, so whether you want to say speak or sing, like in the case like Maynard, thinking, like the opera singer, it's like, if you're speaking, you can say a million words, but if there's no emotion to it, if there's no conviction to it, it doesn't matter. But someone who just speaks with a deep feel, so that's why, like, if you listen to a classically trained theater person, someone who's studied Shakespeare and things like that, I think about, like, why do people like James Earl Jones, or although he's not as classically trained, like Morgan Freeman, or someone has that kind of voice, but it's got the voice has got that, like you were talking about with Arturo, it's got this fullness. It's not a loud voice, but it's got all the overtones to it, and everything that's said is said with such a level of gravity and importance and emotion that even if it's just, "Hello, Keith, how are you today?" You're drawn into it, And so I think sometimes that we forget that music is a method of communication. It's a method of touching each other's, souls. So, when you're playing now and you're thinking about this new concept of sound, where does your mind go to, or where does your heart go to, or where do you go to find that sound?
Honestly, I kind of follow Arturo's guidance on this. I listen, say for instance, if I'm gonna record a song, a Jobim song. I did Jinji the other day, and I went back and I listened to Al Jarreau. I listened to an original recording from Jobim himself. I listened to El DeBarge. They did a great CD. It was like a twist of Jobim back in the, I want to say early 2000s, maybe late 90s. And so I listened to the approach of their lyricism. If I'm going to do a standard, I'll go back and I'll try to find Ella Fitzgerald. I'll try to find Billie Holiday. I'll try to find Aretha Franklin, believe it or not, because their approach is different from somebody who's looking at a page and going eighth note, quarter note, eighth note, triplet. They're not thinking that way. They're thinking lyricism. They're thinking lyrically. And so it forces me, should we say, off the page. And that's probably been, over the past 7 months, that's been the biggest lesson that I've gained from Arturo, is get off the page, hear the lyricism. What do you want to say with these lines? Because if you listen to the lyrics, it makes you say it in a different way than if you're just looking
Right.
at,
Yeah, I can't remember who I heard talking about that. It wasn't on one of my podcasts, unfortunately, but I do remember someone saying about learning, like with standards particularly, learning the lyrics, because the lyrics are the story, and if you play all the notes, but you don't understand what the composer was trying to say, then it's hard to really capture it. So, getting that essence, I think that's really, really important. I mean, when you start to listen to the lyrics of, some of the, obviously might have to translate some of the Jobim stuff, but when you start to understand what that composer is really talking about, it just changes your approach.
Right. Because ultimately, a composer like Jobim was telling a story. If you listen to Al Jarreau, the old recordings of Al, he was telling you a story. I think about George Benson too. George is one of my favorite guitar players and favorite vocalists as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, everything is lyrical. Everything is a story. Going back to Aretha Franklin, going to Prince. I mean, it runs the gamut of singers, and it doesn't matter what genre of music. Arturo's asked a lot, "What's your favorite style of music?" And he said, "The good one." And they're like, "Oh, jazz." And he's like, "No." He'll listen to country if it has a meaning and a sense of compassion and impassionment, and it pulls you in. He'll listen.
Yeah.
So that's really the big thing is really trying, because going from a technical aspect, which is articulation, and then going to a lyrical aspect, I'm finding that to achieve the lyricism, I have to use all of the articulation bag. It can't be slurring. It can't be tonguing. It can't be over tonguing. It can't be under tonguing. It has to be a mixture of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no good answer to be able to tell a student until you say, you really need to have a good listen to this guy, the way he's singing it, and then mimic the words through your horn.
Yeah.
And that's self-discovery.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if we kind of saying with that idea that the artiste as opposed to the player,
Exactly.
you when you're looking at the art, yeah, great. You do want to listen to other trumpet players. I mean, obviously, you want to listen to the standard bearers for our particular craft,
Correct.
but listening to a great guitarist will give you a different feeling. Listen to a great bass player, a great vocalist. And from one of the things that I had kind of started doing years ago is I have become obsessed with studying and observing people who are great at their craft, any craft. I don't care what it is, cooking, running a business, writing a book, whatever it is. It's like, if you're good at something, I mean, if you're in the upper echelon of whatever it is that you do, then there's some specific skill sets that you had to develop, some mental skill sets that will apply to anything. There's a saying I love that how you do anything is how you do everything. And
Exactly.
so the secrets to success are fairly consistent across the board, but there's these variations in how it's expressed. So when I can look at a dancer, a professional dancer, and see things that they do, like how they're moving and the rhythm and the pacing and the flow and and that sort of thing, like, well, okay, well, if I'm trying to apply that to my music, it's like, well, does my music move in that way? If I'm looking at graphic art, it's like, well, what's the artist trying to say? What are the emotions it's drawing up? And you start to develop this palette, like they use colors. You develop a palette of sounds and articulations and things like that. So I think that sometimes we do ourselves a disservice by just focusing on, well, I'm just going to listen to jazz trumpet players. Well, great. Yeah, you need to listen to Clifford and Freddie and Miles and all those cats. Yeah, absolutely. But you should be listening to country music. You should be, as much as I hate to say that, you should be listening to, if it's good, you should listen to it, because there's something, the reason it's good is because someone has developed their craft to a high level, and you have something to learn from that.
It was, I'm one of those guys that's guilty of owning an Arbin book, but rarely using it.
Yeah, I use it all the time. It holds up my table, keeps it even.
But the thing that changed my mind about that, it was a conversation with Arturo again, fairly early on. And he said, did you know that Clifford Brown, including Freddie Hubbard and Clark Terry, would not leave home without their Arbin book? So if they were on the road, their Arbin book was in their hotel room and they were studying out of it. And that really blew my mind, because the first thing that popped in my mind, like I'd say 95% of the other trumpet players, is, oh, it's a classical book. I'm a jazz guy. No, man. Clark would take and he would swing all the stuff and then try to find variables on how he could make it swing even harder. Or maybe not swing it at all. Maybe he would play it as lyrically as he possibly could. There's so many golden nuggets in those books that they don't need to be rewritten. But you're exactly right. I mean, it doesn't matter what form of art you're doing. The process had to be there. And I think the artist or the person that's become successful basically had to get out of their own way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're our own worst enemy. That's without a doubt. So let's do this real quick. Let's do the obligatory gearhead stuff. So yeah, that, because we're trumpet players. We're never going to get past that caveman mentality. So what kind of stuff are you playing on these days?
My mouthpieces are from Austin Winds, out of Austin, Texas. A really good buddy of mine, Doug Maines, runs that company. I also play his trumpets. He has a trumpet out called the Balanced Ballad. And so that's my dark trumpet. And then my go-to horn anymore is one that Mike Del Quadro put together for me. Arturo was kind enough to let me play what he calls his Frankenstein. And it's 3 or 4 different trumpets, I can't remember now, put together to become one. Mm-hmm. And he calls it Frankenstein. Kind of like who just passed away yesterday, Eddie Van Halen had the guitar that he called Frankenstein.
Right.
And so over the course of about a year and a half, because it took a while to find the parts, we assembled the parts for me able to build my own. I took it to Mike and said, can you do something with this? And he put it together, and that's now my go-to horn.
Yeah.
As far as trumpet is concerned. Flugelhorn, I'm using an old Courtois, an R54, I think, R54, or 154 rather. It was the same one that Maynard was playing when I was on the band with him. So I just happened to have the same model. It's not his, it's the same.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you got to do what you got to do, man. So you've been doing some video editing as well, I understand.
I have. Over the course of the lockdown, I've had to learn how to run Pro Tools in Logic. So I do a lot of recording engineering for Arturo.
Mm-hmm.
I don't classify myself as an engineer. I classify myself somebody who gets lucky. And then the video editing thing, I've been doing videos now for a few years, using some of the Apple products like Final Cut. And so when Arturo figured out I could do that, we started working together on various projects. So I always send him and say, okay, what do you think, boss? And if he likes it, great. If not, he'll say, okay, take this image out and put this in, or maybe that's not a real good angle for me. So put the other video we did in. And so it's a nice balance. We work together on that stuff. And he's been great. He's really helped me grow, made it safe again for me to be able to make mistakes, which is great. And so we try to put out the best we can. But yeah, it's been a learning process.
Yeah. Well, I mean, besides the fact that COVID has just completely screwed the pooch for most of us in terms of live performance, are you doing, or were you doing, or are you planning on doing more in the live scene in LA as things become open?
I mean, I was playing lead for a couple of bands that are friends of mine. Hey, boys. Hey. Sorry about that. So I'd like to get back in and play with, friends that I've developed here in LA. I had a great time playing with them. Over the last 7 months, I've been putting together my own album. So I've got a CD kind of in the works. I also have an EPK, an electronic press kit, in the works. And again, Arturo's been helping me along with that. Go and listen and say, okay, well, I would go back and fix this, or maybe bring the bass down a little bit, or tweak that. And he's been great helping me with that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, as far as trying to, should we say, jump into the LA pond and swim? No, I really kind of want to do my own thing.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's an interesting world out there, having a few friends that are in the scene out there that, man, I certainly, I don't know if I had the mindset for that particular environment.
Yeah, no, there's some amazing players, great guys. I love Wayne to death. Yeah. And I respect him greatly. But what I see for myself is not swimming there. I see myself wanting to do more of what Arturo's doing, with my twist on it. Yeah. And that's just what speaks to me. It has nothing to do with, well, I can make more money doing this.
Right.
It has everything to do with what speaks to me. But guys like Willie and Wayne, all those guys have my respect. Dan Fernero, amazing musicians.
Yeah, they're great musicians, and there's they're the people that thrive in the studio scene. They're the people that thrive in the the featured artist kind of scene, and those that just kind of like to hang in the background and just lurk in the shadows somewhat. So
but they can step out front too. They're amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've known Wayne for a number of years, and he's just a great guy, just one of those all around guys that he'll do whatever is needed to be done. If it involves the trumpet, there's nothing that he can't do, and just such a super nice guy, and I think that's there are. And I mean, by no way insinuating that studio session is full of ruthless cutthroats, but it's a different environment. What the demands that are put on you in that studio environment. The level of unpredictability. You have to be able to deal with that, and it has to be something that doesn't create any mental tension. And do it over, and then the next gig you're playing third in the symphonic piece, and the next gig you're playing lead on a Latin piece, and you've got to be able to jump around, and it's great the people can do it and do it well, that's great. And then other people just kind of like to, stay in their lane and just, it's cool.
Exactly.
You got to find your voice. And I think that's, ultimately, I think the thing is that when people are trying to push you in a direction and saying, well, if you're a great player, you need to be a session player. Or if you're a great player, you need to be a symphonic player. If you're a great player, no, you need to express your music the way that best suits the way you want to express your music.
I agree with you. I agree. Exactly.
So, with that being said, the final portion of our episode is always a speed round. Now, yes, a speed round. So this is a rapid fire round. I'm going to throw a bunch of different questions at you. Not all of them are related to music. Actually, very few of them are related to music.
Yay!
Yay! So we're just gonna throw these out, and we're gonna see where we land. I've got to get a special sound effect for, like, when people give a really bad answer or something like that.
Nice.
So, but here we go. Keith in his speed study round. First question: who's the biggest influence on your life that is not a trumpet player?
Oh, my grandfather.
What's your favorite book?
I can't think of the name of it.
Arbans.
Yeah. Okay, say Arbans.
Okay. When in doubt, say Arbans or Clark. What's the worst movie you've ever seen?
Oh my God. Probably Cobra.
If you weren't a trumpet player, what would you want to be?
A car designer, car builder.
Okay. What's your favorite drink?
These days, coffee.
Kona? Colombian?
More Italian. Espresso.
Espresso. Okay. You're going to have a dinner party, and you can invite any 3 people in the world. Any 3 people. Who would they be?
Arturo, Maynard, and Dizzy.
Okay.
You didn't say living or dead, so
I messed up, because normally it's the first one would be, let's do this one again. Okay, any 3 living people.
Living. Okay.
Any 3 living people.
Let's say Arturo and family, my mother and my uncle.
Okay, good. Now, same question, but any 3 people from history.
Any 3 people? Yeah, okay. So again, Arturo, Maynard, and Dizzy.
Okay. Lacquer, plated, or raw?
Lacquer.
Okay. What's your favorite quote?
The quote about travel, from Mark Twain. Sorry. I'm being put on the spot. It's not my fault. But yeah, his quote on travel is my favorite.
Okay. What's your greatest fear?
Having to go get a day job.
Ooh, man. You're going to be granted one superpower, but only one. What would it be?
Flight.
Let's see here. Next question. What aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most overrated?
High notes.
Okay. And what aspect of trumpet playing do you feel is the most underrated?
Playing musically.
All right. You are granted the ability to go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
Don't get trapped in the high note game.
Okay. And you're given just an extra couple seconds to give yourself advice about life.
About life. Have more self-confidence, but yet remain humble.
Okay. And the final question: what do you want your legacy to be?
I worked hard. I remained a nice person. Pretty much that.
Okay. Well, I think that if anything, that would be, the world would just be a better place if we all kind of adopted that. So just work hard,
Yeah.
don't be a jerk. And
Exactly.
it's amazing what we could accomplish.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like we talked about, one of the things I think about and remember Maynard for the most, yes, he was a great trumpet player, but I think about more of who he was. And with Arturo too. Okay, yes, he's the best in the world. In my opinion, hands down the best in the world. But he's like a father to me. That's what I will always hold dear to my heart. So that's why I give the answers I give.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Keith, I want to thank you for spending time with us today. And for all you listeners out there, just please listen to the words coming from this man, and not just the words, but just the fact that he's living, he's practicing what he's preaching, just keep at it, find a great mentor, don't be afraid to, if there's someone who has some information that you think would be beneficial to you, don't be afraid to ask them, because, that's, for most people, that's really what they want to do. They want to share their knowledge. They want to share their wisdom. They want to share their experience. And especially for those of us who love what we do, we want to inspire people who love the same thing to be able to get more joy out of and satisfaction out of what they do.
I agree. And just get out of your own way.
Get out of your own way, man. So, Keith, thanks so much for spending time with me today.
It's been an honor, man. Thank you so much.
Oh man, I can't say enough good stuff. So make sure you check the links in the show notes, and we'll get you connected with Keith, his website, and you can always check him out on Facebook and things like that. And keep an eye out for his upcoming release. I'm sure it's going to be killer. So, as always, thanks, folks, for hanging out with us. Peace and slide grease. We're out. Hey, thank you so much for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating connection through our mutual love for the trumpet life. I hope that you learned a few things about today's guest and had some laughs along the way. Don't forget to give us a review. We love those 5-star ratings. And please share this podcast with your friends. We want to see our hang grow for show. Have a suggestion for a future topic or a guest? Hit me up at thetrumpetgurus@gmail.com. Our opening theme was written and performed by Lexi Signor, and all other music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. So in the words of W.C. Handy, life is like a trumpet. If you don't put anything into it, you don't get anything out. So go out there and let your trumpet sound. And I'll see you at the next hang.